Starting. Oh, I'm here. Hello. Hi. I'm back in Oxford, and tomorrow I have my collections, which are like little mini exams, like tests, to like, I don't know, just see how I'm doing. And I haven't done much revision over the like winter break. So I was like, well, I need to revise the stuff that I wrote essays about last term. There's nobody here. I've got no viewers, so that's great. But like, I need to read through my essays, but I also just don't want to. So I was like, why don't I read my essays to people on the internet? There's one person here. Hello. Or maybe it's me. Oh, because I'm watching it. Oh, now there's two people, so there's someone here. Yeah, I'll put this on my, oh no, I don't want to put it on my Twitter, because I don't want my classmates to watch this, or the people in the year above or the year below, because I don't want them to know my essays, because they're not very good essays, but I need to at least like remember what I wrote. Hello. Yeah, so I have 6 essays about Japanese linguistics, and I'm literally just going to read them aloud so that I can understand them. And I guess if you guys have any questions, you can ask them, but this is really just for me so I can read my own essays and know what's going on. Hi. So I'm going to try not to actually look at the chat too much. I'm going to try just to focus on reading my essay. Is this lighting okay? Is that better? I look quite, I don't know. No, I haven't had collections. This is me revising for my collections. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't really want to do this, actually, on the stream. I don't know what to do. I don't want anyone else from Oxford watching this. But yeah, well, I don't know how else to revise, like, because I don't have anyone to read my essays aloud to, apart from you people. So maybe that's what I should do. I've got too many windows open. What should I do? What should I do? How should I do this? Should I just read one? Let's see. What essay does everyone want? Do you want an essay about accent, an essay about Japanese honorifics, about 3 features of the Japanese language, about Japanese lexical strata, about split intransivity, or about women's Japanese? Make your choice. I do have other Japanese students that I could revise with, but they're all revising their own stuff. And also, like, for some reason, it's less embarrassing to read an essay to however many people are in here than it is to read it to my classmates. 今日本じゃないです。今、オックスフォードにいます。But I don't know, what should I do? Should I do this? Or is this silly? Okay, whatever, I'm just gonna read one. Let's start with women's Japanese, because that's quite an easy one. I want to have it so that I can see myself and see the chat and see my essay at the same time. Let me just figure out my like windows. If I make me small and put me in this corner here, that's better. Okay, so this essay title is Describe and discuss the main features which are usually said to be typical of women's language in Japanese. Include a discussion of the extent to which these linguistic features really characterize women's language in any meaningful sense. Okay. Japanese expressions vary depending on the nature of the speaker, the listener, and the reference of the nominal arguments of a sentence. There are plenty of variations that can be said to be dependent on the gender of a speaker. Gender, at its simplest, is the binary state of being male or female. However, it is in fact far more complex than that. Historically, it is connected to sex, but gender is based on cultural expectations of how people should act in society based on their sex. Gender can be entirely removed from sex, and there are many people whose gender is not the same as the one that they were assigned at birth based on their sex. However, it is important to acknowledge that these cultural expectations and constructs based on gender do exist in reality, and one's gender identity can be a huge influence on language variation. Japanese first-person personal pronouns differ from European first-person personal pronouns because most of Japanese personal pronouns are derived from regular nouns. For example, watakushi, I, comes from private thing, and kimi, you, comes from emperor. Japanese first-person personal pronouns also differ depending on the level of formality in a conversation. Both women and men use watakushi as the most formal level, but the usage of watashi is different. Men only use this first-person personal pronoun in formal situations, whereas it has more versatile use for women, who use a variation on it, atashi, in casual situations. I have a typo in this essay, but I can't change it. Men use boku and ore respectively for informal situations. And that is from Shibatani, 1990, page 371. Shibatani claims that the sentence final particle wa with a rising intonation different from the wa with falling intonation used in Kansai dialect is used exclusively by women, and that ze and zo are used in men's rough speech. He also mentions that clausal nominalizers. I do look tired. I'm changing this lighting. What shall I do? Oh, how can I move this lamp? If I reflect the lamp off the wall. That's a bit better. I don't know. Maybe it's the same. Anyway, he also mentions that clausal nominalizers no and koto used to convey some surprise or emotion, and the dubitative ending kashira are also used exclusively by women, and found that ze, zo, and sa were used primarily by men to express their insistence on a propositional statement, and that wa and no were primarily used by women to create emotional rapport between the speaker and the addressee. Ide, 1979, did quantitative analysis on conversations between university students and found that some particles were used exclusively by either men or women, and some were only preferred by one or the other. The use of these particles indexes the femininity or masculinity of the speaker. People who use wa, wayo, wane tend to index their identity as female, and people who use zo or na tend to index their identity as male. Ide's data suggested that women use sa more than men do, even though McGloin had suggested it was used more by men. This is likely because of the formality level of the respective situations, as Ide used casual conversation in her research, and McGloin just used intuition. Ide and Yoshida in Tsujimura, chapter 16, page 17. Shibatani also points out that when the final particle yo is present, women tend to delete the copula da, and that the copula is included underlyingly as they surface in polite forms, e.g. desu yo. He asserts that when women use dayo, it sounds rather blunt and masculine. From Shibatani. Shibatani describes the Japanese used by women as characterized by softness and politeness. His reasoning for this is that there is a less frequent use of Sino-Japanese forms in preference to native Japanese forms, and that women tend to use a higher politeness level than men in the same situations, and that there is a greater use of the beautification prefix o in women's speech. This is distinguished from the honorific o because the beautification prefix can sometimes even be used for the speaker's own possessions, e.g. osaifu. However, there is a connection and synchronic overlap, as it still cannot be used for inalienably possessed objects of the speaker, such as finger, whereas it can be used for the same objects if they belong to the addressee or a third party. Language purists suggest that this prefix is even being overused, with examples like obiru or genkan. Shibatani writes that although this is a factor of feminine, soft Japanese, it has been seen in men's language also, particularly by salesmen who have primarily female customers. This demonstrates that gendered language is perhaps not only influenced by the gender of the speaker, but by genders of people around the speaker. In language, voice characteristics can identify individuals, but may vary within an individual depending on speech situation and purpose of speech. An experiment by Ohara Yumiko in 1997 compared voice pitch of male and female speakers in natural conversation and in reading sentences in Japanese and in English. In every instance, women's voices are higher. Women were found to both speak and read with a higher pitch in Japanese than in English, and higher in conversation than in reading aloud, whereas men did not have anywhere near as great a range of pitch across tasks. In a second experiment, Ohara altered the pitch of some recordings of women saying greeting words such as konnichiwa and sayonara, and then asked male and female subjects to assess the characteristics of the women in each recording. The recordings with lower pitch were more likely to be assessed with characteristics such as stubbornness, selfish, and strength, and the higher pitched recordings were more likely to be associated with cuteness, kindness, and politeness. These characteristics are desirable for women in Japanese society, and so women are concerned to project themselves as having these characteristics by speaking with a higher voice pitch. While there are many language variations that seem to apply only to the Japanese spoken by women, it seems difficult to group them all together and definitively label it as women's Japanese. It seems unlikely that many women exist to whom every single one of these characteristics apply, other than perhaps examples of fictional characters using yakuwari kotoba. As gender identity and gender roles are not a strict binary, there are women who identify with different levels of femininity and masculinity, and this can come across in the way that they speak. Queer women or lesbians are perhaps more likely to use traditionally masculine words, as they are already excluded from the traditional binary of socially expected gender roles by being attracted to other women. Abe 2004's research of lesbian bars in Shinjuku found that there were some variations of language that are not seen as stereotypically feminine. For example, that some lesbian customers and staff used first-person personal pronouns other than atashi or watashi. Women in the lesbian bars were also seen using the sentence final particle dayo, which Shibatani had described as rather blunt and masculine. It is, of course, not only queer women who use masculine language in Japanese, as every woman's gender experience is different, and every woman has their own circumstances which leads to language variation personal to them. Therefore, while it is possible to make generalizations about language which is used more often by either women or men, it does not seem reasonable to attempt to definitively label a set of language characteristics as women's Japanese. The end. Okay, so yeah, I guess maybe later I should make kind of short notes about these, like just make my essay into notes, because tomorrow I have to like write one from memory, or like, yeah, so I'll get asked an essay question, but I assume it'll be one of the ones that I've already written. Like, that would be shocking if, oh no, it will be one of the ones I've already written. I just need to sort of memorize what I'm talking about in these essays. So anyway, that was my women's Japanese one. Okay, next. Let's do 3 features of the Japanese language. That seems easy enough. Well, not easy, but like it seems cool. Okay. So this episode, this essay is called Identify, Describe, and Discuss 3 Main Features of the Japanese Language. So here we go. Japanese is, contrary to popular belief, not a particularly unique language. It is a fairly typical human language as far as its grammatical structure is concerned. Modern Japanese has a relatively average phonology with a moderately small number of consonants, 16, and an average number of vowels, 5. It has a relatively simple CV syllable structure. Japanese is an SOV language, meaning that the basic word order of transitive sentences is subject, object, verb. SOV languages are not uncommon. Other examples of SOV languages include Ainu, Korean, Mongolian, Turkish, Burmese, Tamil, Hindi, and Navajo from Kuno, 1973. The SOV word order amounts to roughly 50% of the world's languages from Matsumoto, 1987. However, apart from the fact that verbs must appear in the sentence final position, Japan has a relatively free word order where the subject and object can be put in different positions of a sentence. Of the previously mentioned other SOV languages, only Turkish and Hindi are not head final. As an example, the sentences John ga Mary o butta and Mary o John ga butta, John hit Mary, make equal grammatical sense, whereas any variation of that sentence where butta is not in the final position do not make grammatical sense. There are many features of the Japanese language which are directly related to the fact that it is a subject-object-verb language. These include that it is a postpositional as opposed to a prepositional language, the fact that it is a left-branching language, and that verb-phrase deletion works backwards, and that interrogative words do not have to move to sentence initial position. Japanese is a postpositional language, meaning that it has no prepositions. Case relations and other functional relations that would be represented by prepositions in English are in Japanese expressed with particles. This is common to SOV languages. Greenberg, 1953, said, "With overwhelmingly greater than chance frequency, languages with normal SOV order are postpositional. The postpositional particle case marking system follows the nominative accusative pattern, marking the subjects of both transitive and intransitive clauses with the particle ga and the object of a transitive clause by o." From Shibatani. Japanese is left branching. This means that genitives, adjectives, and relative clauses precede the head nouns. For example, John no imoto ga shinda, omoshiroi hon, Mary ga kaita hon, or even John ga katteiru neko ga koroshita nezumi ga tabeta cheese wa kusatte ita. John keeps cat killed, rat ate, cheese was rotten. Or the cheese that the cat that John keeps killed at was rotten. In Japanese, this sentence is grammatically correct and is intelligible, but in English is nearly impossible to understand. This sentence has 3 left-branching clauses, but it is possible to have many more left-branching clauses, and that is why Japanese is a left-branching language. The direction of verb phrase deletion in Japanese is also related to the fact that it is an SOV language. In English, we delete all but the very last of identical verbs and verb phrases in a coordinated sentence. For example, John hit Mary, Bill Jane, and Tom Martha. French is another SVO language that works in this way. However, in Japanese, we delete all but the last of identical verbs in a sentence. John ga Mary o, Bill ga Jane o, Tom ga Martha o butta. This can also exist in English. John feebly and Mary vehemently protested. Forward verb phrase deletion does not work in Japanese because it is a rigid SOV language, meaning that you can not end with a noun phrase. John ga Mary o buchi, Bill ga Jane o, Tom ga Martha o. Because all clauses must end with verbs. Oh, this is confusing. The Japanese language is well known for its many ways of distinguishing various levels of respect and politeness using grammatical and lexical means. Japanese has 4 levels of sentence styles with respect to politeness. These are informal, polite, super polite, and formal writing. Mikami, 1970. For the copula da, these forms are respectively da, des, de gozaimasu, and de aru. These patterns apply to all copulative, adjectival, and verb expressions in Japanese. These levels are not related to respect, which is on a different plane, but are dependent on how close the speaker is allowed to feel toward the hearer. For each style level, there are 2 different types of honorific forms. One with which the speaker expresses respect to the subject of the sentence, and another which expresses respect to the object by placing the subject below the object in their esteem. This distinction is shown by two sets of grammatical verb forms. Plain form is matsu, to wait. Respect for the object is matareru or omachi ni naru or omachi da. And respect for the object is omachi suru or omachi moshiageru. Politeness and respect are not only reflected in verbal paradigms, but also in the use of different vocabulary. There are 4 levels of politeness for first-person personal pronouns, yes, and the word yes, and irregular verbs such as be and do. Furthermore, Japanese has a wide vocabulary of giving and receiving verbs. The correct verb to be used is determined by the speaker's respect for the subject and the relative positions of the subject and object's respective social statuses. Kuno, 1973. In conclusion, there are several features of Japanese syntax which are very closely related to the fact that it is a subject-object-verb language. These features are not particularly surprising or unique, as they are common to SOV languages. However, the complex grammatical and lexical distinction of politeness and respect levels is slightly less common, with only a few other languages having a similar system. But that one is harder. Like, I feel like the thing is, though, it's talking about quite simple things, but it's hard to put it into like linguistics language, if that makes sense. Like these sort of, I don't know, left branching and verb phrase deletion and like these funny little phrases are actually describing like very simple things that you sort of just learn from learning Japanese. So I don't know. So probably even if I don't remember all of the proper words, then I can just kind of use logic and talk about what I know of Japanese. I don't have to remember all of it, but I have to be able to answer these essay title questions just from the top of my head. So I guess I do have to remember all of it, yeah. Okay, what should we do next? Let's do honorifics. Because I just talked a little bit about honorifics in that essay. Yeah. Okay, this is the title. Honorific language is said to be an inescapable aspect of the Japanese language, and the description of the generation of Japanese honorific forms by application of rules of grammar has been attempted by many people. It does count as revision. I'm learning it. It's going in my head. No. If it is a part of Japanese grammar, why does honorific language have to be acquired and actively taught over a long span of the development of a speaker's linguistic competence? What does that tell about honorific language? What does that tell us about language in general? Answer the question beginning with a concise description of honorific languages in Japanese. Well, I mean, like, I think maybe this isn't going in my head, but I think if I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't even be reading the essays. So at least it's a start. So I'm just using this to read through them, and then I'll like actually try and put it in my brain afterwards. That's my plan. Okay, so this is this essay about honorifics. The Japanese language is well known for its many ways of distinguishing various levels of respect and politeness using grammatical and lexical means. Japanese has 4 levels of sentence styles with respect to politeness. I think this is literally, the paragraph is copied from the previous essay. These are informal, polite, super polite, and formal writing. For the copula da, these forms are respectively da, des, de gozaimasu, and de aru. These patterns apply to all copulative, adjectival, and verb expressions in Japanese and are dependent on how close the speaker is allowed to feel towards the hearer. Addressee honorifics are polite forms used when the conversational situation calls for formality. They are represented with inflectional endings on verbs and adjectives, des, mas. Addressee honorifics create a social distance between the speaker and listener. There are two different types of referent honorific forms, one with which the speaker expresses respect to the subject of the sentence, and another which expresses respect to the object by placing the subject below the object in their esteem. This distinction is shown by two sets of grammatical verb forms. Referent, I have literally just talked about this in the other essay. So this is that stuff about mataru no omachi ni naru, omachi da, omachi suru, omachi moshiageru. The verb iku to go is irasharu as a respectful referent honorific, mairu as a humble referent honorific, and ikimasu as an addressee honorific. Politeness and respect are not only reflected in verbal paradigms, but also in the use of different vocabulary. For example, Japanese has a wide vocabulary of receiving and giving verbs. I just talked about all of this in the last essay. The correct verb to be used is determined by the speaker's respect for the subject and the relative positions of the subject and object's respective social statuses. Honorific language is an example of language variation as people speak differently depending on their individual social status. However, this culturally rooted linguistic phenomenon should be examined with caution. The generalizations of honorific forms by application of grammar rules can represent a normative ideological use of language, but as Tsujimura points out, real situations involve a much wider range of cultural and social variables than what was understood. In Okamoto's example of different linguistics customs in similar social situations, the saleswoman at a women's clothing shop in a department store follows the norm of honorification, whereas the fishmonger does not. Tsujimura suggests that the street market's friendly atmosphere calls for a lack of rigid formality. It would seem laughable if the fishmonger spoke with the same honorific level of Japanese as the department store saleswoman. I'm liking these comments. Japanese people are pretending to translate what I'm saying, and they're saying that I'm talking about like oden and saying I like eggs and fish sausages. This demonstrates that the decision by a speaker to use a particular form of honorification cannot be reduced to just an ideological norm, but is controlled by many factors. This choice of honorific form depends on linguistic, social, and cultural context. From Okamoto, 1997, and Tsujimura, 2013. This could be why proper use of honorification has a need to be acquired and actively taught, rather than naturally absorbed as a child. Use of honorification and politeness requires a deep understanding of social context, and so we wonder, how do children reach a socio-cultural and socio-linguistic level advanced enough to be able to correctly distinguish between various forms in adult language? It has been observed that correct usage of addressee honorifics, desu and mas, appears in children's speech by as young as 3 years of age. Nakamura, 2002. Children's speech environment is mostly restricted to household dialogue with caregivers, and the only use of honorific Japanese is observed in role play, telephone calls, and in disciplinary situations. In role play, children mimic speech between adults and accurately use addressee honorifics. Children can use honorifics when picking up the phone on behalf of the household, and in disciplinary situations where the adult is viewed as the authority, children accurately use addressee honorifics in apology. In comparison to addressee honorifics, referent honorifics show a much later acquisition. This may be due to the linguistic complexity presented in their variety of forms. Referent honorifics include morphologically productive formations and idiosyncratic forms that need to be individually memorized. The linguistic complexity of referent honorifics is made more difficult is made more difficult because respectful and humble expressions need to be used appropriately with a level of understanding of social hierarchy. Early in life, children are not often exposed to situations which allow them to reach a full social understanding. Nakamura, 2002, gives some examples of referent honorific expressions that young children are observed to use, but they're usually ritualistic, like itadakimasu, or they are frozen set expressions used by companies to customers. For example, nani ni nasaimasu ka? This suggests that honorific language, unlike plain colloquial language, is only able to be acquired once one has a certain level of social and cultural awareness. A child can learn to speak colloquial Japanese by conversing with their caregivers and can learn addressee honorifics and a few frozen referent honorific phrases by mimicking adult conversations and by understanding very basic social situations which require polite speech, e.g. being disciplined by an adult. However, in order to use referent honorifics dexterously, one needs to understand their own place in a social hierarchy and the ranks of those around them, as well as having a strong understanding of social and cultural context. Being able to use honorific language is not just a matter of language skill, but perhaps requires a more complex, mature understanding of social and cultural constructs. This demonstrates that language as a concept is not based only on grammar and vocabulary, but also on a complex knowledge of surrounding society and culture. Idioms, honorifics, humor, and many other factors of language are reliant. Oh, I dropped a spoon. And many other factors of language are reliant on a knowledge of society, and so it could be said that it is impossible to become entirely fluent in a language without learning about the target languages surrounding culture. In conclusion, honorific language has to be actively taught over a long span of the development of a speaker's linguistic competence, because it requires not only a knowledge of grammar and vocabulary, but also a strong understanding of social and cultural context. This demonstrates that language itself is deeply tied to culture and that a certain knowledge of society and culture is necessary for a speaker to be able to easily produce and understand all aspects of a language. Okay. I don't think this is going in my head. What should we do next? Then there's like the crazy ones, like lexical strata and split intransivity. I don't know what my... Oh, I've got a very short one for accent. Oh, I've got a headache. This isn't very useful for my life. Okay, whatever. Let's do this accent one, and then we'll do the difficult ones. Yes, I do need to kind of, I mean, I don't have to memorize them word for word, but I have an exam tomorrow where I need to be able to answer these essay questions just like in an hour. But I don't know these things yet. Okay, so these next three are slightly more weird and more complicated linguistic-y thing. So I don't know if I'll be able to be good. We'll see. Okay. Give a description of the main systems of accent, comprising both accent proper and word tone where appropriate in Japanese dialects, including both phonological and morphophonological aspects. Here we go. A lot of data has been accumulated by various Japanese linguistics over the long history of the study of Japanese accent. Japanese consists of many dialects, and each have their own phonetic peculiarities, and the accentual phenomena of each dialect differ in at least some ways. However, in terms of their tonal melodies and accentual patterns, dialects can be classified into a number of types. Japanese accentual and tonal systems can be divided into two types, accentual systems and unaccentual ones. Accentual systems are divided into subtypes in terms of the number of both underlying and surface accentual patterns. This is represented as n+1, n+2, etc. unaccentual systems are divided into tonal systems and unaccented or intonational systems. Both the accentual and unaccentual systems can be further classified into a number of subtypes in terms of the number and type of tonal melodies. Okay, Tokyo Japanese, for example, is an N+1 accentual type dialect with one basic tone melody, HL. Osaka Japanese is almost identical. It has an N+1 accentual pattern for each melody, but has two basic tone melodies, HL and LHL. Old Kyoto Japanese has three basic tone melodies, HL, LHL, and LH, while the underlying tonal pattern is also N+1. Okay. From Haraguchi, 1999. Accentual systems of Japanese dialects have a number of characteristics. Verbs and adjectives are divided into two classes in one of two ways in almost all dialects, either unaccented or accented, or into two different melodies, e.g. HL and LHL in Osaka Japanese, LHL and LH in Kagoshima Japanese, etc. Nouns tend to have more accentual varieties than verbs and adjectives. Trubetskoy, I don't know how to pronounce his name, 1969, proposed that natural languages fall into two groups, Mora languages and syllable languages, according to the smallest prosodic unit that is used productively in the language. Japanese is classified as a Mora language, whereas modern English is classified as a syllable language. A mora is a unit of duration in Japanese where it is used to measure the length of words and utterances. In Japanese, the notion of mora is indispensable as it functions as a phonetic unit to define temporal organization of speech, as a phonological unit with which to define phonological distance or length, and as a segmentation unit in speech production, and as a perceptual unit relevant in speech perception process. Dialects have different systems which have different numbers. Oh, this is so hard. I don't know what I'm talking about. Dialects have different systems which have different numbers of surface accentual patterns and tonal melodies. Three types of systems of distinctive pitch usage have been identified, with Kagoshima, Tokyo, and Kyoto dialects being the typical representatives. Tokyo Japanese is a typical dialect with a pitch accent system. It has a distinctive lexically specified accent, which is realized by pitch and accentuation rules. Some words can be distinguished only by accent, for example, kaki. Initial accented kakiga means oyster plus the nominative particle. Final accented kakiga means fence plus the nominative particle, and unaccented kakiga means persimmon plus nominative. I really like this. Like, I find that so fun. Kakiga, kakiga, kakiga. Anyway, in isolation, kaki meaning fence and kaki meaning persimmon have the same melody. However, they are distinguished when followed by, for example, the nominative morpheme ga. Tokyo's basic Japanese melody is HL and has N+1 accentual patterns for N mora words. Words are divided into accented and unaccented words. More than half of all nouns are unaccented, and approximately 75% of accented nouns have an accent on the head of the syllable head containing the antepenultimate mora. I think I need to read like all the books that I got all this information from instead of just reading my own essays, because my own essays are not very good. Okay. Tokyo Japanese has the tonal surface melodies for nouns. Tokyo Japanese is peculiar in that we cannot project where the H to L falling tone occurs. Therefore, lexical information regarding where the falling tone appears is needed. Word tone register is not relevant in Tokyo Japanese, as it distinguishes three basic melodies: rising, falling, manifesting unaccented versus initial or non-initial accented. I don't really understand what accented and unaccented words are. Like, I don't know. What does it mean for a word to be accented? I don't understand it. Well, because I've got either. So further up here, I've said that verbs and adjectives are divided into two classes. They're either divided into accented and unaccented, or they're divided into two different melodies. For example, like high-low and low-high-low. So that high-low and low-high-low is separate. Oh, I guess how is rising and falling different from like high-low and low-high-low? I don't understand. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I understood it when I wrote it, but I forgot. Oh, whatever. Okay. Word tone register is not relevant in Tokyo Japanese, as it distinguishes. Okay, so Tokyo Japanese doesn't have accented and unaccented words. It just has rising words, falling words, rising, falling words. I feel like I've used too many different words for the same things, and it's made me confused. Whatever. I'll look it all up after. Okay. Kyoto Japanese distinguishes four basic word melodies: high, falling, rising, and rising, falling. This is manifested phonologically with combinations of accent, defined by a drop in pitch, and tone, defined by the initial pitch of a form. Words which begin on a high pitch, high or falling words, have a lexical high word tone. Words which begin on a low pitch, rising or rising falling words, have a lexical low word tone. Words with a drop in pitch, falling, and rising falling words have an accent on the last mora before the drop. Words which drop in on the last mora before the drop. Well, that makes sense because that makes it sound like the accent is just the high. The location of an accent is distinctive, but initial accent is only allowed in words with a lexical high word tone, and final accent is only allowed in lexical low word tone words made up of two moras. Okay. Well, that makes sense, but I feel like what's my point? What am I in Kyoto Japanese, high, low shaped lexical words have recently changed to high, low shaped lexical words. Therefore, the location of an accent in words of less than 4 moras is no longer distinctive. Unaccented words with a lexical low word tone have an automatic final rise in pitch. Okay. Kagoshima Japanese distinguishes two basic word melodies: rising and rising, falling. The location of a pitch drop or rise is always between the penultimate and the final mora, unless a neutral particle is attached. This system is thought of in word tone. The falling melody manifests high or falling tone, and the rising melody manifests a low or rising tone. What's my point? Like, what is my point? Like, I'm just saying, like, when things are low, they are low, and when they are high, they are high. I don't know. Despite dialect eradication and erosion and standardization which has taken place since the start of the 20th century, Dialectical prosodic systems and differences between dialects are well preserved. Dialect groupings based on prosody. What's prosody? Prosody. I'm gonna Google define prosody. I don't know how you pronounce it either.
Prosody.
Prosody. The patterns of rhythm and sound used in poetry, or it's just the patterns of stress and intonation in a language. Okay, now do hold on. Okay. What have I done? Oh, it's okay. Okay, so that one I definitely need to go back and read some things about accent because no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, I've got two more. I have lexical strata and I have split intransivity. Lexical strata is easy, so let's do that. Whee! Okay, so this one is like about loanwords, basically. Okay, here's the title. The title is Several vocabulary layers or strata are usually posited for modern Japanese, native, Sino-Japanese, loanwords, and mimetics. Describe them and discuss to which extent they may be thought to be real in the mental lexicon of speakers, and if so, how they are defined phonologically or otherwise, e.g. sociolinguistically. I quite liked this essay, so I think this will be in my head, hopefully. We'll see. Okay. The vocabulary of a language reflects the socio-economic and cultural concerns of those who speak it. The vocabulary of the Japanese language consists of several vocabulary layers, including native Japanese, Sino-Japanese words, foreign loanwords, and mimetics. The presence of these words demonstrates cultural influence from foreign countries and the cultural concerns of native Japanese people. Japanese native vocabulary reflects the traditional socio-economic activities centered around fishing and farming. The native Japanese vocabulary has many words relating to crops, fish, nature, and senses and feelings. There are also an abundance of expressions relating to weather, as the ability to communicate clearly about different types of rainfall would have been important for farming. Many other natural phenomena appear in expressions which make fine distinctions among syllable objects. As rice is a staple food in Japan, the words for it are delineated regarding its different states. There are different words for rice plant, raw rice, and cooked rice. The words for cooked rice, gohan or meshi, can be used to refer to meals in general. This reflects the important status of rice as a staple in the Japanese diet. Shibatani, 1990. There are numerous names for fish in Japanese, and some species of fish even have different names for different stages of their maturation. The fish called yellowtail has several names according to its size in Japanese. As fishing is traditionally very important to Japanese culture, there are also many words for specific kinds of offshore areas and shores. For example, nada, ura, hama, iso. The native Japanese vocabulary is lacking in the domain of body parts, bodily movements, and domestic animals. There are no individual words that distinguish between a leg and a foot or a hand and an arm. The words used for these body parts are respectively ashi and te. And there are no basic words distinguishing cow, calf, and bull. The basic term ushi is compounded cattle, is compounded with prefixes to define what type of cattle it is. Jumping, springing, and flying are all covered by one verb, tobu, and warau covers all manner of laughing, smiling, and chuckling. This lack of specificity is made up for with a large range of adverbial onomatopoeic expressions, which I will discuss later in this essay. Shibatani, 1990. Whee! I like this essay. I think this is maybe my favorite one that I did. Japanese has many loanwords borrowed from neighboring countries such as Ainu and Korean, borrowed more recently from English and other European languages, and most numerously Chinese loanwords. In the Genkai Dictionary from 1859, the proportion of Sino-Japanese words was 60% and other loanwords were just 1.4%. The proportion of gairaigo, foreign loanwords from European and other languages, has steadily increased. as was shown in a 1964 report of word types in magazines by the National Language Institute. 9.8% of distinct words were classed as gairaigo. However, the proportion of Sino-Japanese words has remained fairly constant, Shibatani, 1990. The proportion and status of Sino-Japanese words have been said to be similar to Latinate words in English. It is believed that Chinese words were originally introduced into Japan during the 1st century AD or earlier. In the Nihon Shoki, Chronicles of Japan, AD 720, it was written that the introduction of the Chinese language happened around AD 400, when Korean scholars brought Chinese books into Japan. For a long period, Chinese words and characters were primarily used only for scholarly writing and recording official documents, but by the end of the Edo period, 1603 to 1867, they had been absorbed into everyday Japanese language, being used in colloquial Japanese and local dialects. Hang on. Oh, my laptop's gonna die. Okay. Many words classified as kango, Chinese words, are in fact not of Chinese origin. After the Meiji Restoration, 1867, as part of an attempt to renovate various academic fields, many new terms were invented, which were mostly translations of English terms. They were created using existing Chinese characters and so are considered to belong to the Sino-Japanese stratum despite their non-Chinese origins. The majority of Sino-Japanese words are nouns, and in order to function as verbs, they must be compounded with the native word suru, to do. Yes. Okay. Sino-Japanese words tend to express abstract concepts and comprises most of Japanese academic vocabulary. Native words such as kino and asobi, kino, yesterday, and asobi, play, are usually found in colloquial language, while their Sino-Japanese counterparts, sakujitsu, yugi, are used more often in literary language or academic vocabulary, shibatani. Sino-Japanese words are perhaps more semantically transparent than native words. Sino-Japanese nouns generally consist of 2 or more morphemes, the final morpheme usually indicating the object category of the word. For example, words referring to various types of machine often end with the morpheme ki, machine. Since the meaning of each character is relatively stable, it is often possible to guess the meaning of a Sino-Japanese word even upon seeing it for the first time. Japan used to demonstrate the traditional pattern of borrowing from culturally advanced countries geographically close to it, in Japan's case China. However, nowadays, with modern international trade and communication, Japan borrows words from countries geographically rather far away that are technologically and economically superior to itself. Loan words, other than those belonging to the stratum of Sino-Japanese words, are called gairaigo, foreign-coming words. Japan first made contact with the Western world when a merchant ship from Portugal came to the island Tanegashima of Kyushu in the 16th century. Following the Portuguese, the Spaniards and the Dutch also came to Japan. These were all the foreign interests Japan had throughout most of the Tokugawa period, at the time when Japan had closed its doors to contact from the outside world. Therefore, the earliest gairaigo were from Portuguese, Spanish, and Dutch. Until the latter part of the 19th century, Dutch was the main language of foreign studies, used to obtain advanced knowledge of medicine and astronomy. It has since been usurped by English. The shift from Dutch to English as the language of foreign learning in the early Meiji period is reflected in the countries from which the foreign specialists who were hired by the Meiji government came. In 1872, according to the Oyatoi Gaikokujin Ichiran roll of foreign employees, 119 of 214 employees were English, and only 2 were Dutch and 1 was Portuguese. This change can be seen in the modern composition of gairaigo. Ueno, 1980, who studied the origins of 162 foreign words actively used in the Taisho period, found that 51.9% of the words were of English origin, 27.8% were Dutch, and 14.2% were Portuguese. Words originating from certain languages can sometimes be concentrated in certain fields, showing the focus of Japan's contacts with that country. For example, the majority of German loanwords are found in the fields of medicine, mountain climbing, and outdoor sports. French words are found in the fields of art and fashion, and many musical terms are borrowed from Italian. While English terms had previously been translated into Japanese semantically using Chinese characters, it is now much more common to directly represent the sounds of the words using katakana. The transliteration of foreign words into katakana can drastically alter its pronunciation, as consonant clusters and final consonants of a loanword are altered into sequences consisting of a consonant and a vowel. For example, strike, which is one syllable, becomes 5 mora, sutoraiki. There can be also a level of semantic change when a foreign word enters the Japanese language. One of the most frequent types of change is narrowing, which is when only one aspect of the original meaning of the word is adopted. For example, stikki, stick, can only be used in the context of a walking stick. Stobu, stove, only means a room heater. Some words have a complete shift in meaning. For example, the French preposition avec becomes the Japanese abeku, meaning a dating couple. Just as kango are Japanese-made words using Chinese characters, there are also many words coined by the Japanese using combinations of existing loanwords. For example, bakumira, back plus mirror, means a rear view mirror, and oeru, OL, office plus lady, is a female office worker. These new foreign words are, of course, even more unlikely to be understood by English speakers than directly imported gairaigo. However, they may be harder to understand for Japanese people as well. While kango have meanings that can be guessed by looking at the Chinese characters, the meanings of these new foreign words are not easily guessable. Shibatani. Another group of words in the Japanese lexicon is formed of onomatopoeic and other sound symbolic words. There are words which are conventional mimetic expressions of natural sounds, kiseigo, or phonemes, words which depict states, conditions, or manners of the external world, gitaigo, or phonemes, and words which symbolize mental conditions or sensations, gijogo, or psychomemes. Many of these onomatopoeic words involve reduplication, and some have the ending "di." They function syntactically as either adverbs with the particle to or ni, as predicates with the verb suru or copula da, or as noun modifiers with no or na. As was mentioned in the section about native Japanese words, Japanese verbs have rather general meanings, and so can be modified with onomatopoeic words to give a more specific meaning. For example, kusun kusun naku, to sob, wa wa naku, to cry. There is some correlation between sound qualities and synesthetic effects. For example, forms which end in a glottal stop, which assimilates to the T of the quotative particle to, which follows. For example, kurutto, dosatto, symbolize a sudden cessation of action, quickness, or the single occurrence of an action. Reduplication symbolizes repetitive sounds or movements, and the nasal ending produces a sense of rhythmicality or long resonance. Shibatani. This is long. Forms with voiced sounds tend to have more negative connotations, as well as often meaning louder, heavier sounds or bigger, rougher actions or states. For example, ton ton represents a light knocking sound, and don don represents a banging sound. Kira kira represents sparkling, and gira gira means glaring gaudily. Onomatopoeic words are by no means a direct rendering of natural sound. The fact that there are dialectical differences in onomatopoeia demonstrates that these expressions are really conventionalized expressions in each linguistic community. Shibatani. Some people believe that these lexical strata could be real in the mental lexicon of speakers. However, Rice, 1997, called lexical stratification an assumption of Ito and Mesters. Ito and Mester, 1995, suggested a number of phonological criteria for distinguishing between the strata of Sino-Japanese and native Japanese. They believed that rendaku, the transformation of a syllable from unvoiced to voiced when the word it is in is the second part of a compound, was restricted to native vocabulary, and that Sino-Japanese words all had root monosyllabism. However, Rice insists that while rendaku is frequent in the native Japanese vocabulary, it is not restricted to it. Vance, 1987, notes that some Sino-Japanese morphemes are affected by rendaku. For example, undo, exercise, and fusoku, insufficiency, becomes undo busoku, lack of exercise. He also points out that there are some native Japanese morphemes which resist rendaku, and some which are just inconsistent in terms of whether they are affected or not by rendaku. Vance concludes that this means that the fundamental irregularity of sequential voicing remains a fact of modern standard Japanese. Vance, 1987. This suggests that perhaps there is no real lexical stratification in the minds of speakers, as the same rules can affect Sino-Japanese words and native words in the same way. Rice mentions a number of other distributional criteria that have been cited for lexical strata, including that a root must be monosyllabic in Sino-Japanese but not in other strata, and that a non-geminate P is not tolerated in Yamato and Sino-Japanese vocabulary but is allowed in the other strata. She then mentions that these constraints are not valid because there are surface counterexamples. She states that root monosyllabism is indeed a necessary characteristic of Sino-Japanese vocabulary, but is not sufficient, as non-Sino-Japanese roots can be monosyllabic as well. She also mentions that many of the underlyingly monomeraic Sino-Japanese words surface as disyllabic once they have entered the Japanese lexicon, which further makes the constraint surface opaque. Rice, 1997. In conclusion, that was so long. In conclusion, it is unreasonable to say that there is a real lexical stratification in the minds of speakers. As foreign words enter the Japanese lexicon, they are transformed on entry and further transformed throughout their use, often to the extent that the speaker may not easily know a word's origins. While it is true that there is a larger proportion of certain words in certain contexts, for example, more use of gairaigo in television commercials to make the product seem modern, it cannot be said that there is a particular distinction between lexical strata in a speaker's mind. Oh my goodness. Ugh. I like this essay, but I wrote way too much. Like, I kept talking about, I don't know, random stuff. I've got a headache. Okay, I think I've just got one left to read, which I think is probably the one that I will understand the least. Saigo no essay desu. This is the last one that I'm going to read. And then I don't know what I'll do. Try and get them in my head. Okay, here's the title. This is a hard one. Here's the title. Describe split intransivity and the unaccusative hypothesis. Hi, Karen! And the unaccusative hypothesis in general and as applying to Japanese. Describe and discuss the arguments for claiming that split intransivity is grammatically significant in Japanese. Is split intransivity primarily a syntactic or a semantic phenomenon? Okay, here we go. This is the one where, like, when you read that title, you're like, what even does that mean? But once you learn what all of the words mean, it kind of is okay. But this was a hard one. Okay. Intransitive verbs are verbs which take one argument and therefore have no direct object, unlike transitive verbs which must take two arguments. Split intransivity is the idea that there is a split between different classes of intransitive verbs in relation to the behavior of their arguments. The unaccusative hypothesis posits a two-way split among intransitive verbs. This hypothesis was first developed by Perlmutter in 1978. It suggests that in all languages, there are two classes of intransitive verb called unaccusatives and unergatives. They differ in the grammatical relation borne by their single argument. Okay, Ergative transitive verbs have the subject-noun phrase in the same position in both its surface structure and deep structure analyses, so no movement of the subject occurs. In the example sentence, 学生が先生と笑った, the students laughed with the teachers, the single argument 学生が functions as the subject of the sentence in both the surface and in the deep sentence structures. Therefore, the verb warau, to laugh, is an unergative verb. In unaccusative verbs, the apparent subject is actually acting as the object of the sentence. Jacobson, 1992's example of a sentence containing an unaccusative verb is as follows. Taro ga kabin o kawashita. Taro broke the vase, versus kabin ga kawareta. The vase broke. In the first example sentence, kabin, vase, is the direct object of the transitive verb kawashita, broke. In the second sentence, kabin is in the place of the subject of the sentence, but it's actually represented by a trace in the noun phrase, which is within the verb phrase. Hi, Mari. Enjoy Sims. Okay. As the vase does not break of its own accord, it is still broken by something, even if it appears to be the subject of the sentence. Therefore, kawareru is an unaccusative verb in this sentence. One diagnostic test for whether a verb is unaccusative is by scrambling numerical quantifiers in a sentence. A noun phrase and a numerical quantifier have to be C commanding each other in order to be grammatically acceptable. I can't remember what C commanding is. I will look that up. This therefore means that scrambling cannot apply to the subject-noun phrase of a sentence. The ability to scramble can thus be used as proof for unaccusativity of a verb. In a sentence with a transitive verb, for example, 客が3人ビールを飲んだ, the 3 customers drank the beer, it is ungrammatical to move the numerical quantifier which modifies the subject of the sentence, e.g., 客がビールを3人飲んだ. Sentences with unergative verbs in them cannot have their numerical quantifier scrambled in this way either. For example, 学生が公園で犬と3人歩いた. The 3 students walked with a dog in the park. However, sentences with unaccusative verbs can be scrambled in this way, e.g., 客がホテルに遅く3人着いた. The 3 customers arrived late at the hotel. This demonstrates that in this sentence, the noun phrase 客 is not necessarily the subject of the sentence, but is acting as the object. In the second sentence, the verb tsuku, to arrive, is directional, and therefore telic, as there is a clear endpoint and goal. This hypothesis is based on the syntactic condition that the subject of an unaccusative verb and the direct object of a transitive clause have a similarity. However, it has also been suggested that the split in transitive can be accounted for semantically rather than syntactically. Tsujimura, 2007, suggests that telic, directional verbs are unaccusative, whereas atelic, non-directional verbs like aruku, to walk, are unergative. This is evidence of a semantic basis for split intransivity. The following diagnostic test also uses semantics to determine whether a verb is unaccusative. One can determine whether a verb is unaccusative or unergative by attaching the affix kake to verbal forms in order to nominalize them. However, the affix is grammatically incorrect in some cases. A sentence with a transitive verb, e.g., Hanako ga biru wo nonda, Hanako drank beer, nomikake no biru, beer that has been half drunk, is grammatical, whereas nomikake no Hanako, Hanako that has half drank, is not. Therefore, the kake affix can only be attached to the verb if it is modifying the object of the sentence. In a sentence with an unergative verb, e.g., Hanako ga hashitta, Hanako ran, hashirikake no Hanako, Hanako who has half ran, is not grammatical. However, if the verb is unaccusative in the sentence, for example, in the sentence doa ga aita, the door opened, the phrase akikake no doa, the door that is half open, is grammatical. This shows that the verb aku is unergative because the kake affix is able to be added due to the fact that doa is actually acting as the subject of the sentence. In conclusion, it can be said that split intransivity is both a semantic and a syntactic phenomenon. Both syntactic and semantic diagnostics are relatively sound. However, the notion of split intransivity also signifies a number of qualities of the verb that is being diagnosed. For example, as Tsujimura wrote, that the directionality and telicity of verbs of movement can be identified by determining whether a verb is unaccusative or unergative. Okay, I've read you all my essays, apart from two that weren't really essays, so I'll just look at them later because they're like diagrams and stuff. So thank you for watching, if you were watching. Sorry that I wasn't really talking to anybody. I've been reading the comments in the corner of my eye, but yeah. Okay, I need a wee, and I need to do some real revision now. So I will say bye-bye. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye. See ya. Bye.